Welcome to my dungeon.
Welcome to Kuldrin's Krypt. I'm your host, Master Kuldrin. If you're new to the show, this is a place to dispel myths, get rid of stereotypes, and answer your questions about BDSM. You can call in at 865-268-4005 to leave your questions, or visit the Krypt at kuldrinskrypt.com. On this episode of the Krypt, we're going to talk about the types of DOMs, but first, let me welcome my amazing co-host, Funsize. How are you doing today?
Oh, I am just excellent. How are you?
I am doing really good. All right, let me go ahead and hit those rules to love by, and then we will jump straight into this conversation. So, rule number 1, safe, sane, consensual, and informed. Rule number 2, kinky from the KNKI app, available on all platforms. That stands for knowledge, no intolerance, kindness, and integrity. And number 3, the quote from Mr. Paul Young: submission is not about authority, and it's not about obedience. It's all about relationships of love and respect. All right, so we've got our rules to love by, which in a lot of ways applies a great deal to this particular episode in talking about DOMs. So let's go ahead and hit our definition of what a DOM is, and then we'll just go from there. What do you think?
Sounds good.
Okay.
A dominant is someone who is inherently drawn to taking a role of power or control over others through means of consent. There's actually a quote here from husdom.com that I found that explains dominance excellently. Quote says, being a dominant has nothing in common with being domineering. In fact, one is a contradiction of the other. A respectful dominant does not rule arbitrarily based on choice or that of a personal whim. A dominant does not possess an unbridled supremacy or limitless power. And I think that really goes back to just being respectful and seeking consent in all things.
Yeah. So that was Husdom, HUSDOM.com.
I've got the link included with our show notes. So anyone that would like to go check out the article in full that I found that quote from may do so.
All right. Let's get into the different types of DOMs and then, I guess, dive a little bit deeper into some of those.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. A top?
A top is a person who takes control during a scene. And that's not really the same as being a typical dominant, because a dominant may take control outside of a scene as well, but a top usually prefers just for the scene or just for that particular act.
One thing that we didn't mention in starting this off before we get into these things is that people can be more than one of these.
Yes.
I'm very much a top and a dom. The difference there is looking at the physical aspect versus the psychological aspect. So when it comes to scening, I prefer to inflict pain, the physicality of the scene, regardless of what type of scene that may be. And that's also a big misconception, that it is all about impact play or topping to inflict pain. There is a lot of different types of topping as well, not just impact or pain. There's also pleasure topping, sensual topping, all kinds of it. Basically, if you can think of it, you can do it. And for those out there who come into lifestyle, which I know most guys come in, well, I'm a manly man, so I'm a dom, I'm a master, I'm a top, whatever. And they don't give themselves the opportunity, sometimes for years or even for their entire life, to experience the other side of that coin. So I highly recommend, before you go to FetLife and you post your status, or your role rather, try it all out, but do it slowly. We've discussed what our next episode is going to be and talking about frenzy, and that's people that just really jump into it way too quick and want to try everything at once, which is really the normal thing that people do, but that doesn't mean that it's healthy. But we'll get into all that later. The important thing to take away right this second is that when we're talking about DOMs and tops, there are different aspects of each one of these. All right, let's go ahead and move on. I think next on our list after the top is the femdom.
Yes, the femdom, the female dominatrix. Obviously, I am one. There's this stereotype that I actually want to hit with this, and it's a big one.
I brought up this stereotype in the interview with you and your husband.
Yes, you did. There is the stereotype that in order to be female and to dominate someone else, whether it's men or women, you have to be hard, you have to almost be cruel, and that's simply not true. There's this pressure that women feel that push them into sometimes pushing their bottoms or their subs too hard, which can lead to injury and discontent. And it's a stereotype. We don't have to be hard. My last sub could attest to this. I was very gentle with him and very caring. So I just want to make sure to rip that stereotype out by the roots, because there's no real truth to it. There's no reason we should feel this kind of pressure.
Yeah, it really pushes some women into becoming abusers when they do that, because they feel that, especially if they are topping a man. Now, to be completely honest here, a lot of men that I know that prefer to be topped by women want that. They want that extreme, but that doesn't mean that every person does, or that you have to be that just because you think that that's what people want you to be. That is a consideration.
Yes, but that goes into negotiation and communicating your needs with your partner. If you do need that kind of hardness, communicate with your partner. Find out if it's something that she wants in this case, something that she feels like she can give while still maintaining herself, her true self. And if you're asked by your sub to do this, to be like this hardness, this almost cruelty, and you don't feel comfortable with it, communicate that, because your needs matter too. And you have to find the balance with your partner in all things.
Yeah. Now, this next one, I think we've hit that pretty well.
Yes, we have.
Okay.
It is. Do you want to take it?
I do. And I do because this one is a master or a master. See, I'm frustrated with it. It is a major pet peeve of mine. And this is a very common mistake that new people make. And that is the master or mistress form of dominant. And the mistake here is being brand new, coming into Fet life and just throwing on there that you're a master. And that is a very earned title. In the leather community, there's a ceremony that goes along with becoming a master. You receive your cap for that, a master cap. Yeah, I know someone who is getting theirs this month, actually, who has worked very, very hard in earning that. So just to throw that out there is really disrespectful. So if that's what you've got, please don't do that. The way to earn that is a true master or true mistress is someone who either has a slave, and there is a big difference between a submissive and a slave, or has spent years and years and years mastering a particular form of BDSM, a particular craft, and has been recognized by the community as a master of that craft. And most of the people who are true masters are actually very humble people that don't feel the need to put that out there. At the time that I started this podcast, I was a master in both aspects of it. So that is why I am known as Master Kuldrin. However, now I do not have a slave. So on FetLife and everywhere else, I simply go by Kuldrin, and I don't have the need for people to recognize my years of studying and training and this type of thing. It's not really a need for me. To me, that just seems kind of arrogant. So I had changed everything, I guess, when I gave up or when things ended with my former slave. So I just don't, it's a massive pet peeve. It's something that really is disrespectful to those of us who have earned that as a title. And I just really warn against it, because when you're new, you want to really have a good impression with people, and you want to be open to learning and to studying. But if you already have that mindset that you're a master, well, that creates a psychological disability with being willing and open to learn things. What do you have to throw out about that?
I would just like to throw out that I often refer to you as Master Kuldrin. This isn't because I'm a position where I am your slave, because we have not taken that step yet.
Correct.
The reason why I refer to you as Master Kuldrin is because I know of the work that you have put into mastering your crafts. So I would just like to clarify that I am doing it out of knowledge and respect of you, not to recognize a certain position. And like you, I really don't like to use that title with people that have not earned it. There is one other person in my life that I have ever referred to as Master, and I actually was his slave for several years. So for me, he definitely earned that title. But without me, he is just himself. because he is not taking another slave. And he doesn't get called master anymore, unless I'm referring to him as my old master, so-and-so.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that typically only the newer people will get caught up in, unless it's somebody who is unfortunately pretty arrogant in it. And that's okay. I mean, some of the old school people are very caught up in titles. Because, I know one person, he's been around for 45 years, and he himself is exceptionally arrogant in every part of his life, and he knows it. I'm not going to call him out by name, but he wouldn't listen to us anyway out of his own arrogance. And again, he and I have had this conversation, so it's no big deal. But I'm not being as crass or as rude to him as I sound, but even he does not go by any title. He just wants people to call him by his name. It's just who he is. Just call me this, and this is who I am. Besides the fact of his mastering of his craft, which is absolutely amazing to watch. I just hope that people get a quarter of the feeling when they watch me as I do when I watch him, because it's simply amazing. But even in all of his arrogance, he doesn't push a title onto people. So be very, very cautious about that. But I think I've beaten this dead horse long enough. Let's go ahead and move on. Now, this next one I really like. Go ahead and jump into it, because I want to hear how you get into this one. Hey, Master Kuldrin here. If you're having trouble putting together a contract for your DS or MS relationship, or if you just want something nicer, say in soft or hardbound, check out BDSMcontracts.org. I've used them in the past, and I will continue to use them in the future. Use the coupon code Kuldrin20 for a 20% discount off of all purchases. That's BDSMcontracts.org.
So the next thing on our list is gentlemen and lady dominants. These are dominants who behave in chivalrous and honorable ways towards their submissives and often any who surround them. They showcase respect and good manners in all things. I absolutely love gentlemen and lady doms. They are so amazing to watch and to work with and to work under. It is a fantastic thing. I really love the way that they comport themselves.
My wife is new to the lifestyle, and she has taken on the role of a lady. Yeah, she's always motherly. In fact, if anybody would like to say hi to her, she is Lady Catherine 7 on FetLife. If you go to our group, she's one of the admins there, or whatever it's called on Fet, so you can say hello to her. But like you, I absolutely love this. I am very big on etiquette, and these are people who take that etiquette and mix it with a Renaissance style. And I would imagine that Dragon is like that, being very Renaissance himself. Am I correct in that assumption?
He tends to mix this style with that of the caring dominant, and just a little touch of sadism.
Huh. Interesting.
Yes. So this definitely goes back to what we were saying before about how you can be more than one kind. And I know that you and I will probably explore, when we get done talking about the various types, we'll explore which types we fall under as well.
You can pretty much just look at the list and throw a dart at it, and I have been or will be that type. So, yeah, we're just touching on these because there's so many. So if you have any specific questions about these, don't hesitate in contacting us and saying, hey, can you give a little bit more information on such and such? So either one of us. Actually, for this, I would highly recommend contacting Funsize. She doesn't have enough to do anyway, so holler at her and she will be more than happy to get into these with you. Now that little aside is out of the way, Findom.
Yeah, Findom is a dominant who asks their submissives to send them tributes in money or usually expensive gifts as part of their submission. They also control other financial aspects of their subs' lives. More than once, you have suggested for me to do this. I'm not really sure how I feel about it, and that's because there are certain organizations out there that are starting to take a negative look towards financial domination. I believe Vanilla Umbrella, it's a dating app, is one of them that has come out and said that they no longer want any financial dominance on there to use it as a way to connect with
they
people.
will allow professional doms on there as long as you're not pushing your services, but they will not allow any findoms to even have a profile on there if it becomes known that you're a findom. And by the way, most people think of findoms as women. That's not the case. There are a lot of men who are also financial dominators. So keep that in mind as well. But the reason why I recommend that you would make a good findom is because you are responsible, and you would allow someone to tribute you in an appropriate way without breaking them, though that is the goal of a lot of people. That's the ultimate fantasy of a lot of people who look for a findom. If you can be pushed to that limit, because the extreme limit there is bankruptcy, then that's the fantasy. Remember, when you're talking about fulfilling these needs, people start developing that extreme fantasy of being pushed to the limit or being pushed beyond the limit. And that's not healthy. So that is one of the reasons why I think that you would be good at it, because you are going to be able to tell people no when it becomes too much. You're very responsible. And I think that you would just get a lot of, aside from the money factor of it, I could see you as being somebody that would really enjoy the tribute side of it.
That really isn't something I think I could enjoy. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with it when it's done responsibly, because doing it irresponsibly is a form of abuse. But I have trouble sometimes when my friends just want to buy me a cup of coffee. So for me, the tributes, all of that does nothing good for me. I think I would actually have a lot of trouble accepting anything like that. But
and
that's me
maybe that's
personally,
another reason why I would want you to do that.
I feel like this is something that you and I will perhaps have to negotiate further down the road off mic in that case.
And that's how a negotiation gets started, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, it is. All right, next on our list is Daddies and Mommies, which I am literally just going to sit back and let you run with, because this is definitely your area of expertise.
All right. Daddies and mommies are dominants who choose to take on the role of a daddy or a mommy to a little submissive, or one who practices infantilism. They typically focus on guiding and caring for their submissive as a parent would. Now, that is the technical definition, but that is not 100% accurate, in that I'm very much a daddy dom in a lot of ways. I said earlier that you could throw a dart at this list that we have, and at any point, it doesn't matter which one you're going to hit. I have done it, or it is part of who I am. This one is a big part of who I am, though I'm not big on age play. It is just really the care and the nurturing of the daddy dom that I like. I honestly can't do the age play part of it. For me, it's just not my thing. I don't have any problems with it. It's just not my thing, as someone who was very abused physically, sexually, and emotionally when I was a child. So I take issue with it in my own play. So that whole daddy or mommy thing can just be a very loving, caring, nurturing thing, which is the caring dom, but you prefer to be called daddy or mommy, or, except for in times of punishment, maybe, then it may be sir or master, depending on where you're at and things. So yeah, that's really the main point on that. I could actually go on for hours, but I'm sure people don't want to hear me ramble for hours and hours and hours about that single thing.
All right, so let's jump back into our list. We've got owners next. And owners are tops or dominants that view and treat their bottoms as property that they own. This includes pets, slaves, furniture, and those who wish to be only objects. When it comes to pets, that's obviously very different from slaves or furniture or even objectification. Pets are usually treated with more care. You can be a pet and have an owner, and they're probably going to treat you pretty caringly with a lot of respect, and not the way they would treat someone who had consented and wished to be treated as, say, a table or a chair. So it's
And I got to throw in
different.
here that pet play or a pet style of submissive is different from animal play. Because at that point,
Yes.
then they are very objectified and treated as, say, a pony or a pig or cow, whatever the animal you want to name is. I've known gerbils and mice and snakes and crickets, and the cricket was a very interesting one. I'll just say that. And
Honestly, that sounds very interesting.
yeah, that. I wish I could go into detail on that one, but out of respect, I'm not really going to do it because they are listeners and they may be known. So I don't want to give personal information that they have not consented to me giving. But yeah, on that one, owners. Now I have been an owner of what I would reference as a bottom slave, bottom of the barrel, just wanted to be completely objectified and be property, as owner implies. If you're going to be an owner, then you've got to have some property. And this person that one was actually unhealthy in that slave auctions and things of that nature were things that were that she had tried to negotiate to take part in. I was not willing to do that. That's a whole nother topic that we could talk about for hours and hours that I'm not really going to get into, but in most cases it's not a good thing. But it's a very interesting dynamic that, to be honest, I didn't think I would enjoy. It was amazing because that is absolutely a TPE or total power exchange, and the level of trust and respect that was there was absolutely phenomenal. And I'm not going to say that it's not there with other types of relationships, but with each type of DS relationship, it very much has its own unique feeling. And that one, in my experience, was probably the most unique, which does not mean it was better or worse than any of the other ones. Just absolutely stands alone as a different type of experience altogether. Do you have any experience with the OP relationship?
No, not really. I've had scenes in which I have been furniture or been an object, but that was for a single scene. It was not this kind of long-term
scening and
relationship.
lifestyling are two totally different things. So, and
Yes,
on
they
that, I would
are.
also like to point out that with something like that, check-ins are just that much more important because you need that break in that type of dynamic even more so than in a MS, DS, any of these other types of relationships, because that plays on the psychological side of somebody more so than any of these others from a truly clinical psychology standpoint. So just to throw out a little side note on that, because it can be very detrimental to someone's psyche to always think of themselves as property. There's often a lot of degradation that goes along with that, and it's a risky way to play. Some people that I know actually consider that very much edge play. Moving on into sadists. Well, Funsize, I am going to have you define the core of who I am.
Well, then I'm going to have to define the core technically, first off. And sadists are technically those who gain sexual pleasure from causing pain to others. This can be physical or mental. That's the technical side. And I've actually had quite a few dominants argue with me because I will remark that they are sadistic and they automatically respond, I'm not a sadist, more than half the time, because they don't identify as a sadist, even though they are technically gaining pleasure from causing others hurt. And I always use the word hurt and not harm because they are different things to me, but you and I will actually be hitting that in a later
hurt, harm,
episode.
and injury.
Yes. So there's a couple different kinds, and I listed two main kinds, what I believe are two main kinds here, and that's the laughing sadist and the sensual sadist. Laughing sadists are those who go into very Joker-esque roles when they play, often laughing or cackling as they perform impact play or hurt their consenting submissive in some other way. They're very happy about it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just their response to those stimuli. And sensual sadists are those who couple pain with sensuality and pleasure. I happen to be a sensual sadist. This goes into something I was talking about in an earlier episode in which I was discussing wax play and how I will set up a scene that will be very candlelit and almost romantic and start off with massage of oils going onto the skin. And then I will start with a wax play. And then I will go into another form of play that gets more and more painful for my submissive until I have them hitting subspace, ideally. That's very typical for how sensual sadists will behave. They'll couple the two together and make sure that their submissive or their slave is riding that fine line between pleasure and pain for as long as possible.
Where do I fall?
I would have to say that you fall a little bit between the two.
Very good.
But with a better part towards sensual sadist.
I would say that I'm exactly 50-50. And the reason for this is because I love screwing with people. I did a scene with someone not too long ago where I was taking a satin cloth and soothing them after some very hard strikes with a dragon tail. And when I was using the dragon tail on them, I was very smiling from ear to ear, laughing at their reactions to it. And then, of course, go in with some sensation play, kind of soothe them a little bit. But my toy box was a little too far away from me to grab an implement that I wanted, which is a wicker rug beater. Very fun toy, using either end of it. And I called upon someone who was watching to come over and grab it for me. And so I flip it around, and as I'm soothing, I use that to strike them. I'm soothing their back, and I use that to strike them across the butt with it. And she immediately starts screaming out, "You're screwing with me! You're being sweet and gentle and kind, and it feels so good." And she absolutely loved it. So did I. It was just phenomenal. These types of sensation plays, and both sides of it are so immensely enjoyable to me, and to be able to merge them together, it's one of my favorite things. So you are correct. There are both sides of it definitely apply to me. I would say that I tend to lean a little dead center, but I can see where you would see the more sensual side as well. And it really depends on the person, too, that I'm playing with. You can't treat every bottom, every submissive the same. If you do, you're doing it wrong. So I play off the person that I'm playing with, as anybody who knows what they're doing will do. So just to be blunt about that. The next one, this is something that I'm studying on. I've known a lot of people in this lifestyle. I do have a considerable amount of information about it, but a lot of it has been lost along the way because I'm not in Atlanta anymore and I don't hang out with these people. And I've truly just forgotten a lot of it as being outside of the leather scene. So Leatherman or leather women, leather is versatile. Very important that people understand that it can be leather men or leather women. And I know that you have a personal passion for leather.
Yes.
Okay. So go ahead and run with this one.
Leather men and women are dominants who practice the old leather traditions of the old guard. They have gone through the lessons and put in the work to earn their leathers and their positions within the community. This goes back to what you were saying about your friend earning his cap. That's a very hard, long process to go through because you have to put a lot of work into it.
And I've got to throw in there, that's not my friend who he is earning. She has earned her cap.
She is earning. Yes, thank you. But there is still this connotation, especially with the newer crowd that is coming in, where they assume that anyone that has their leathers is part of the homosexual community. While this can be true, it's not strictly true. There are quite a few leather men and women who are straight or bisexual or homosexual, and it doesn't matter. It's just like any other group. You'll get a fair mixing.
Yeah, that is actually one of my biggest frustrations with people in general is that assumption, and that one, it matters, or two, that it's a question. It doesn't matter. Yes, that's how it originally started, and who cares? But the old guard leather traditions, I'm reading a really good book right now on that, which is called The Leatherman's Protocol, and I believe you recommended that.
Yes, I did. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I highly recommend that to anybody that has any interest. Actually, I take that back. I recommend that to everyone in the lifestyle so that they can know where it started in America.
Yes.
in knowing how we began, we can know where we are now and plan for the future, basically. Let's move on to the next one. And this one, I have another name for this one. And what you've got in our show notes is the White Knight, which is a dominant type who longs to rescue the damsel or Danes in distress. They enjoy playing the hero. This is also the broken wing or the broken bird syndrome, that need to fix people, help people, whatever it may be. And that one tends to be shrouded in drama, unfortunately.
Yes, my husband has a little touch of this in him. Not towards me, thankfully, because I honestly could not really deal with it, especially at this point in my life. But he does have it, and it is something that he definitely tries to look for in potential submissives for himself. I'm not a huge fan of White Knights, personally, especially due to recent experiences I've had. My last dominant was a White Knight, and obviously I am not a damsel in distress, or a DID as I like to call them, from the old Disney Hercules movie.
Dissociative identity disorder?
Damsels in distress. That doesn't apply to me, and I feel like that caused a lot of friction and unwanted and unneeded strife in that relationship. So it's just not my thing. But if you are a White Knight, which can be women as well, I just want to clarify that knight is not referring only to men. You know, that's your thing. Just understand that you cannot try to fix everyone. Make sure you communicate with your partner.
In the vanilla world, this, and in the BDSM world, the kink world, this used to be a major part of who I was. So when I say that there's a lot of drama attached to this, I'm speaking out of experience. It is exhausting, and the biggest problem with these types of relationships is that if you're successful and you do help the person to fix themselves, which from the psychological standpoint, I have to point that out, nobody can fix anybody else. You can lead, guide, and direct somebody into bettering themselves, but you can't fix anybody. That said, once they become healthy, then you tend to lose interest in them and you will move on to the next person. And the biggest problem there is you create a codependency within the relationship that makes it very ugly when things do end, typically, not always, but typically. And I really, really can't stress enough how unhealthy from a psychological standpoint this is. I have seen when I was working in the psych field full time and working inpatient care, many of our patients would be in the hospital because of a relationship like this ending. In the vanilla world or the DS world, I've talked to a few of them, and it's because of that great level of codependency. And basically what happens is when you lose that interest, the relationship ends, that codependency is there, and by the end coming to the relationship, it will backlash and throw that person that was the broken little bird even further into whatever their issues were before when it's over. So it's very unhealthy, and people need to recognize this within themselves and try to change it. It's, as far as I know, it's the only one on the list that I highly recommend people recognizing and trying not to be that type of person, because I've seen way too many bad things come out of it. And I know this is probably going to spark a conversation with some people that hear this, and I welcome that. So feel free, as usual, contact me. I'll go into more detail with you about it. I don't have a problem with that, as long as you want to have an open-minded conversation about it.
Yes. Like I said, it's not my favorite kind. Doesn't really work with me because I am a very strong and independent switch.
Yeah.
Moving on, mentors and trainers. I obviously love this very much as I offer mentorship and I have formal training. They're people who guide and teach others in one form or another in aspects of the lifestyle. Trainers and mentors can also be submissives, but we've got it on our Dom list solely because I felt like it needed to be mentioned. There are some dominants out there who have reached a certain point where this is all they want to do is mentor and train others. Yeah. And they'll train both subs and doms at that point.
This is one of those things that I find it very interesting because people, no matter what their skill set is, a mentorship as being the mentee is never a bad thing because we can never learn everything. And again, knowing people who have been around for years, and me myself being around for decades, wow, I'm old. Anyway, being around for decades, I do have a few people that I look at as my mentor. Now, they're not officially a mentor, but I go to them for counsel. I always pay attention when I'm around them to how they carry themselves, what they're saying, what they do. So it's something very important, but it's also something that's very cut and dry. So another favorite of mine, and there seem to be a couple of different definitions for this, is the controlled dominant. Now, I look at it from one aspect. You have another definition of it, so I will share both of those. The one that you have is a controlled dominant is a dominant who is being controlled by another dominant or mentor as an agreement in a scene to follow certain rules or learn a new technique. This is different from a junior top as it pertains only to a particular scene or lesson. A controlled dominant may also be one who is following the rules laid down by a protector for a particular scene. Now, that is very important. That is someone who goes into a scene with a person that is maybe owned by someone else, whether it be submissive, slave, property, whatever the case, and they are following the rules of that person's dominant, like you said in your definition, protector. The aspect of the controlled dom that I more look at, and this is kind of where it gets confusing and where it represents that it's your BDSM, make it what you want it to be, is in my definition of a controlled dom, that is someone who control is one of their absolute main focuses, and that is self-control, not the control of others. Maintaining a very, very strict protocol and etiquette within themselves for whatever reason that they need it to be for. For me personally, I come into this type of mindset because I had an extreme temper when I was a teenager. And for me to be very focused, I had to train myself and constantly remind myself that no one can control me but me. And I owe that respect to others to not abuse them and not let myself get out of hand. So to me, the controlled dom is just someone who is always, without fail, focused on their own self-control to be an example to others, not just to make sure that they don't abuse or hurt someone, but they also want to very much be a teacher, be that example. You know, if they're telling someone you can only have one piece of chocolate a day, no matter what kind of chocoholic I am, which, by the way, I am very much a chocoholic.
Me too.
If I am going to instill that rule on someone else, then I have to be willing to follow it myself, no matter how bad my personal addiction to chocolate may actually be. Yeah, I may have a little bit definition to that than anybody else in the world, but again, that's a good example of it's your BDSM, make it what you need it to be to certain degrees. Share your thoughts with me. I'd love to hear what you've got to say about that.
I think your definition of a controlled dominant is actually how dominant should be to begin with. You should always be in control of yourself and be aware of yourself because it sets a good example, and you can't really ask someone else or require someone else to behave a certain way or do a certain thing if you're not willing to do that yourself. As far as my definition, that's something I came across when I was very new to the lifestyle, was those who were under the control of protectors for a particular scene, and often the protector would basically just sit back and watch and almost be a private dungeon monitor at that point.
Yeah, I think both are good. I think what you said is very true, that is how every dominant needs to be, is by my definition. But let's face it, we've both seen a whole lot of people through our travels that were not controlled. They had They had no self-control. And for me, that's and we shouldn't really judge anybody, but at the same time, when we are meeting people and looking at their style, I would say kind of avoid maybe learning too much from somebody who is an uncontrolled dominant. They don't practice what they preach. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's move on. in your definition, you mentioned junior tops. Now, that's something that I haven't heard of or thought about in quite a while. Probably since I was a junior top.
Which I actually find a little bit funny because in some ways both of our spouses are currently junior tops. This is something that refers to a top or a dominant who is learning under the supervised care and guidance of a mentoring dominant. And both of our spouses do this with us.
Yeah.
Is they learn from us and we're there to help them and guide them and make sure that they don't end up injuring anyone.
Yeah. A junior top and a mentee is basically the same thing.
Yes.
A mentee can be under different aspects. This one obviously is just referring to the sane style of dominant. But yeah, I haven't even thought about that in years, like I said, since I was one. So
this next one's a fun one.
Yeah, I just looked at that and my heart kind of started racing a little bit.
Oh my.
Just from the very first word of this section. Go ahead and take it.
Feeders and breeders are those who focus on feeding their submissive with a goal weight gain in mind, or types of dominants that usually look at things from human, animal, or livestock perspectives, i.e. cows, pigs, etc. for feeding, breeding, and milking scenes.
Yeah, now the whole heart racing thing that just caused me a whole lot of anxiety. I am not into pet play. I am not into food play, and it's not my kink. It's fine for anybody else. I have friends that do both of these things in a combination of them, and it's just not for me. How do you feel about this?
I have honestly put myself in scenes that included milking and breeding scenarios for roleplay. They were very interesting. They're very intense, especially given my views on actual, quote, breeding, as I'll put it. It's interesting. It's interesting going into that mindset. The feeding part is definitely not for me, just because I take health very seriously and I don't really need to gain any weight.
Yeah, I've known several transgender women that are really into breeding as a fetish. And I certainly wouldn't say that that's all encompassing amongst transgender women, but it has been quite a few of them that I have known that were really into breeding, and a lot of transamorous men that find that as a very strong fetish as well. Not from a pet aspect, but very much from the human aspect. They just constantly talk about, I'm going to breed you, whatever. Yeah, just a little side note there. So, any last words on the feeders and breeders?
Yeah, I actually just had a thought on the feeding aspect. I think it could actually be a healthy form of domination, particularly if you have a submissive that has any shortcomings or any negative feelings about their own body image to the point where they have found themselves suffering from anorexia or bulimia. I feel like kind of taking them in hand and showing them that you care and making sure that they are eating properly can be very healthy to them, and make sure that they understand that you are doing this out of care and respect for their well-being. I feel like in that sense, it can be a very healthy thing.
Yeah, I do have to add that you and I are not psychologists, psychiatrists, or doctors in any way,
No.
And that before that is undergone, there does need to be a consult with a physician, and that needs to be something that both people are involved in, both the dominant and the submissive, so that it is clearly understood, the instructions from the physician, what needs to take place there. It does not need to be the submissive go to the doctor, get the instructions, and then come back and translate that back, because things could be skewed unintentionally or intentionally. So make sure that that is a dual consult, that you're going into this together to receive that information from a physician. Very, very important. It can be extremely dangerous, and people can die if it's not dealt with under a physician's care when it comes to anorexia or bulimia. Good advice, though. Very good advice, Funsize, as usual.
Thank you. I think the next one is one on here that we can both agree is not an actual dominant, but I threw it on here because I feel like the newbies especially need to be aware of these.
And there's also
quote,
a third
dominance.
There's another name for that as well.
Yes.
Instadoms or instant doms, also wannadoms.
Yes.
And this aggravates me, so I'm going to turn to you for your definition before I start growling.
Okay, I will take it from here. They're not just dominant, they can also be subs or quote masters, which is only in quotes because these are not people who've put in any work or any care. They come across what's usually a fictional snippet of BDSM somewhere, read 50 Shades of Grey, decide, oh, I'm going to be a dominant because I want to spank my girlfriend or whatever. And they decide they're instantly part of the lifestyle. They have not put in any work, learned anything. They have no respect for others or themselves in most cases, I feel.
Or the traditions of BDSM.
Or the traditions, anything. They typically know very little and pretend that they know how to handle things. They don't. The knowledge that we have acquired has come from years of experience and learning and putting ourselves out there. We didn't just wake up one morning and go, oh, we decided we're going to do this or we're going to be this. It's not like that at all.
Yeah, if you wake up one day and you decide you really like spanking your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever, you like pulling their hair, you like scratching them, or you like this stuff being done to you, that doesn't mean that you are dominant. It doesn't mean that you are a master. It means that you're kinky. And welcome to the lifestyle. We love to have you. We want to teach you. We want to instruct you. We want you to do it the right way. And we also want the respect of you coming in with an open mind to soak up the information that we have to give you. And that applies to me as well, because as I've said often, I could try something new every day for the rest of my life and I still wouldn't get it all in there. So even at this stage of the game, with, like I said earlier, God, I'm old, decades in the lifestyle, I could still one day decide that, you know what, I'm a master of the single tail, which you and I have recently talked about, and that's certainly not true. I used to use single tail, as longtime listeners know. I saw someone injured very badly with one, and at that exact moment, I stopped using them, and I have recently started back. I am practicing, and I will practice and practice and practice before I use that on someone else. I am not just going to pick that up and say, well, I used to be good at it, which is the case. I used to be good at it. I've never been great. And before I touch someone with this new 4-foot paracord single tail that I have with a really, really nasty cracker on the end of it, I'm going to be great with it because I've seen the damage that it can do. But even with 22 years in, I could become an insta-dom instantly by saying, oh, I've got all this experience. I'm going to rest on my laurels and just think that I know everything. So it's not just for the newbies. This is actually something that I see people who have been around after they got through the frenzy and they started learning things, and then they become comfortable in what they were doing, revert back to. And it's very dangerous to become overconfident no matter what stage of the game you're in. Overconfidence gets people injured. So I give warning against that.
Yeah. All right. The next one is very you, if I'm not outing you a little too much with this one. But I've got a short quote I want to share before I hand it all over to you and let you fill us in on everything else, because I found this fabulous quote, which I feel really explains this very well. And I'm talking about primals. So I found this quote from Dominantguide.com, in which the author says, I want to start from or get to a place where the feelings are primary, pure, raw, animal emotion, sensation, and or instinct. It could be fear, vulnerability, desire, grief, or any profound emotional state. I want to get to a place where words are gone. There may be grunting, growling, moaning, nonsense syllables, crying, or even silence. Maybe even all of the above. Primal applies, as per Merriam-Webster, in a way that's raw, past rational thought, animalistic, instinctual. It's pure, core, raw emotion without a lot of the sensibility and good training that gets layered over that. All right, so that's the end of my quote. I'm going to step back and hand this over to you.
You are very correct. I am very primal. In fact, in my personal marriage, this is the one way that I am dominant toward Lady Catherine, is our primal play. And I hope it's okay with her for me to say this, but we just the other day had a very, very primal scene, growling, It's a total loss of my human headspace. Basically, I go to a very primitive nature, and whatever I'm feeling in the moment, that is what comes out of me. Typically, it is the only way that I can truly get into an altered headspace, because as a top, there aren't very many bottoms that I know that can take the level of intensity necessary when I'm doing impact play to allow me into that altered headspace. Because again, the controlled dominant, I have to maintain my level of empathy with the person at all times as a personal fear of going too far. But with primal headspace, I can completely open up and let go, and there is clawing, there is scratching. It is absolutely becoming very primitive, where verbal communication just doesn't exist. Not in English or any other written language for that matter. I have been to a primal demo and seen that as something that was very interesting and educational, but I do feel that this is something that doesn't really need very much explaining as far as how it's done. There are ways to improve upon it that you can learn from people who are experienced in it. But I think that it's a base emotion in people, and it is very emotional. There's very intense closeness drawn from primal, other than the fact of just being able to let go and enter that headspace and run up behind somebody with their consent, prior consent, and bite them on the neck and take them down to the ground like an animal stalking its prey. You know, a lion taking down or a cheetah taking down a gazelle or something like that in the wild. Just lunging at them, like I said, grabbing hold of the nape of their neck with my fangs and taking them to the ground. And primal play is very sexual in nature. I don't know any primal players that it is not sexual in nature. It's one of the few forms of BDSM that I consider to be, sexuality is the foundation of it, but it's incredibly passionate and one of the most bonding experiences that I have ever had with every person that I have been primal with. This is one of those types of DOMs that we could have an entire episode about. And in fact, we may need to plan to do that, because I don't want to go on about it too much, other than if you have not played around with this, if you've not talked to somebody about having a primal scene, I think that it's something that everybody should look into and try that experience if closeness and desire, unbridled desire, is something that you're looking into getting out of BDSM.
Thank you for sharing so much with us on that.
Certainly.
So, jumping back into our list, we have protectors, which we discussed briefly when we were talking about my definition of control dominance. Protector is someone who watches over the safety and well-being of a submissive during scenes or at events. They can be dominant outside of these events, but sometimes they merely serve only in this capacity. Very short definition, but also a very important role. This is another subject for which we have earmarked a future episode devoted solely to it. But do you have anything else you'd like to add before that episode airs?
Yes, actually, I would like to say that if you are cruising FetLife and you see someone that has someone listed as their protector, it is good etiquette and standard protocol to keep them in mind when contacting that person. My wife has someone under her protection that anybody that contacts this person, she will refer them back to my wife and say, she is my protector. You need to accept that and contact her first. So she pretty much does kind of a pre-vetting process for the person that she's protecting. And that is something that they've talked about and negotiated. And I really find it quite beautiful the way that they handle it, to be honest, because this person is extremely shy, extremely withdrawn, and very, very new to the lifestyle. And my wife is very much a mother hen that is very protective over her children, so to speak. So that is something that if you really want to impress someone, know that type of protocol. So if you do address them, then say, hey, I see that you have a protector. Should I contact them so that they can do a pre-vetting process or whatever the case? And that level of respect is certainly not going to go unnoticed.
I almost would suggest contacting the protector first and making your interest known as a sign of respect. I think that will go a long way with most people.
Yeah. I would make that recommendation, but I know a lot of cases that is not the preferred protocol by people. It just varies. That's why I recommend that they contact them and ask them what their protocol for that is. Though it should be stated in their profile. If you have someone under your protection or you are under someone else's protection, I would recommend that you put which protocol you prefer in your profile at the bottom of your profile, actually. So that will also help you know if someone is just looking to hook up or if they've actually read what you have to say first. And those are the people that are actually looking for something meaningful most of the time.
Definitely have to agree with you there.
Moving on into one of my new favorite things, something that I am not yet, but I am certainly interested in practicing this as well. Now, I know that this next topic, which is rigging, is a massive, massive turn on and passion for you.
Yes.
So, have at it.
All right. I went very basic with this simply because I feel roleplay needs an episode devoted to it. Riggers are those who set up various rope bondage and suspension devices. It doesn't have to be rope, but 9 times out of 10 it is rope. They may do only this, or they may participate further in the lifestyle.
For me, when I think of rigging, it is solely rope, because bondage carries the other aspect of it. But other than that, yeah, it's a very fascinating thing. It's not for everybody. Someone who I've kind of taken under my wing, I'm not his official mentor, but he attended the rope demo, and afterward he said, yeah, rope is not for me. I don't have the patience for it. However, throwing some cuffs on somebody and chaining them up, he's all about that because it's quick and simple and gets into the aspects of a top-bottom scene, which is impact play for him, that he's really passionate about. He's really taken to it. Moving into service tops.
Ooh, I am this. Can I take this one?
I was just about to ask you if this would apply to you in any way. Wink, wink.
Yes, it is. A service top is a top who focuses on giving service or pleasure to the bottom in their care. Now, I practice this as both a service top and a service bottom. I very much love to give others what they need and what they want in some cases, and to service those needs, both sexually and otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
This is an incredible feeling when you have someone who is bottoming to you and all you are doing is taking care of them in one sense or another. It is incredibly fulfilling. I'm definitely very passionate about this.
Yeah, that is actually something that is, I'm considered a service top in a lot of ways because I will play with anybody. Now, lately I keep my play strictly non-sexual for personal reasons and reasons within my marriage that I just don't need that aspect. To be blunt about it, I just don't need that aspect right now in my play. So I maintain the actual physical topping in an impact play kind of way or a psychological way. However, I'm not as passionate about it as you are. Yeah, I do receive a lot of enjoyment out of it because it fulfills my needs, but from the providing that service to someone else standpoint, that's secondary for me. For me, it's having my own needs met. So I'm kind of a service top to myself, and that is what makes me a play hoe. Basically, is that I will top anybody. I don't care. I know a lot of men that won't top other men due to inherent homophobias or things of that nature. They care what other people would think of them. But I don't care. I will top just about anybody, given that the vetting process checks out. Very important to say that as well.
Yes.
Now, as a dominant or as a top, this is an interesting aspect as well. I know some people who are switches, but they don't identify as a switch, such as myself. I do not identify myself as a switch because I have a single masochistic need that I will only allow a very, very select few people to perform on me. Now, I have had submissives that have wanted to perform this act, and it's belting across the back, as I've said before, across my shoulder blades. I only indulge in this once every few years. So again, that's another reason why I wouldn't wouldn't consider myself a switch because it's very rare, but I will not let a submissive do this to me. My submissives do this to me. And the reason is because I have allowed that in the past and it's created an issue. So I go to someone that in that case would be a service top to perform that on me. It's an interesting dichotomy that can be developed or destroyed between a dominant and a submissive. And it does depend on the dynamic. I would certainly consider that with each person, but as a general rule, that's where I stand with that. Just kind of throwing that out there that it's something that some people may struggle with. I've talked to a lot of people that struggle with that because they're scared. They think that their submissive would see them as weak or vulnerable, and to let them know that that concern is not anything to be afraid of and that there are others out there that share in that concern as well. So it really depends on the submissive and where your relationship stands. The next one, I consider myself, here we go, throwing darts again, hitting random things, and of course it will apply to me. The caring dominant, those who focus on taking care of their submissives, not in the sense of serving them, but in the sense of caring for them physically, mentally, and emotionally. I receive so much pleasure out of being a caring dominant, out of making sure that my submissives' needs are met. And though it is self-serving, that's not the primary reason that I do that. And the self-serving part of it is because if they're taken care of, if they're nurtured and cared for and properly trained, then I am going to be well taken care of as their dominant. So in that way, yes, it is self-serving, but I just genuinely enjoy it. That's why I worked in the psych field for so many years, or in the healthcare field in general for about as long as I've lived the BDSM lifestyle, is because I enjoy helping other people. And some people coming into the lifestyle will look at that and say, well, then you're really submissive because you love serving others. Nope. Sorry, not true. Not the case at all.
I have to agree with you that that's not the case at all. There's a lot of power and control to take this person that has consented to handing their well-being over to you and actually fulfilling that need, and a lot of pride that goes with it.
And I've got to bring up something now. Talking about modern movies or movies in general for BDSM can be a very tricky conversation to have, because some people will say, yes, this movie is a good example. No, this is horrific abuse, blah, blah, blah. But the movie Secretary, at the end of the movie where he comes and picks her up, takes her, and then cares for her, gives her a bath, washes her, and really takes care of her.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is an absolute beautiful, beautiful scene and representation of the caring dom. Take out the rest of the movie, throw it away, whatever you choose, but it can't be denied that that is absolutely a caring dom. The way that he cares for her by bathing her and really nurturing her.
Yes.
All right. This next one applies to probably most of the people currently in the lifestyle that are new
at
to
some
it.
point.
That are new to it, so take that one.
All right. RPs, or roleplay dominants, are those who take on various roles for a scene and take control through those avenues. Examples of these might be the boss, cop, teacher, things of that nature for roleplay. And what this means is you're going into a scene, you're assuming this role, position of power usually, and that is how you are letting out your dominant side. There's nothing wrong with it. We've all done it at least once in our lives. I would seriously be shocked to meet anyone that's been part of the lifestyle for more than 5 years that hasn't explored this avenue of domination and topping.
Well, and I would also like to throw out there that a lot of us old school people consider anybody who is not in a DS relationship a role player, a scene player.
Yes.
And we mix those together. Some people will say, well, they're a scene player. And when we say that, it's not derogatory.
No.
That just means that it's not something that you're living 24/7. You may be kind of like the bikers who are, and I say this case bikers in air quotes, that are weekend warriors. And that's okay. Not everybody has a job where they can live it 24/7. Not everybody can be out with their play and their BDSM. And there's nothing wrong with that. I certainly don't mean it derogatory, but scene players and role players are a massive part of the lifestyle. So not only is it non-derogatory, it's also very important. I play with a lot of scene players, and if they were shamed because of being just a weekend BDSM player, then I wouldn't have them to play with, because they would be shamed right out of the community. So if that's who you are, if that's how you have to do it, that's how you have to do it. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with that at all. The actual role play part of that, that is a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're talking about the boss employee, the cops and robbers, the teachers and students, that type of stuff. Oh, God. Yeah.
Doctor and patient.
I was waiting for you to say that, because I happen to know, along with anybody that has ever listened to us, that is one of your biggest kinks.
Oh, yes.
I look forward to playing that one with you at some point.
Likewise.
So, all right,
we're to the last one on our list.
We are to the last one on the list, and I think that here recently you've given me a little bit of slack about this.
Yes, I have.
And I would love to find out why that is. So, fire away.
All right. Well, there's two different sides to this, and the first side I feel doesn't really apply to you, but it does apply to some. So I'm going to throw it out there. Performers. And this first side is those that often jump into the stereotypical role of a dominant for their scenes. It's the female doms that will come in with their riding crops and their leather corsets cracking and things of that nature. They're putting on a show for their bottoms, and that's part of the scene, and it's very enjoyable, but it does feed into the typical stereotype of how many see us. And then there's those that perform for demonstrations. Again, nothing wrong with it. And I feel like that goes to you, and it's not just those that perform for demonstrations. When I say that performers as dominants performing for demonstrations, I mean they truly perform. They put on a show. They get enjoyment out of that side of things. It's exhibitionism at its finest. And that one definitely applies to you. And it's not so much that I give you slack for it or anything. I just understand that is part of who you are.
It really is. And every time that I'm in a play space with other people, and even when I'm playing privately with someone, it is a performance of sorts to me. I'm very much a performer, and that does not mean that it is not passionate. Everybody disappears when I get into a scene, but if anybody's watching, they go away. But in the back of my mind, I may not know who is there, but I do know that there are eyes on me. And that is very physically and psychologically arousing for me. I really am an exhibitionist, and I am right now, and people are going to shake their head at this. I know that they are, but I am choreographing quite a few scenes right now to do as a performance piece. So basically a BDSM performance art piece at an event that I am planning for the Knoxville area. I know a lot of old school people that have a massive problem with this. They should think that it just needs to come organically and natural. And as soon as you think of it as a performance art piece, then it's no longer BDSM. And let me tell you on that, if it sends you and the people that you're playing with into headspace, it is certainly BDSM. I do catch a lot of slack when I bring this up, but at the same time, I don't really care.
And I don't give slack for any particular notion of that. For anyone who has a chance to witness a performance or have a scene with a true performer, it is going to be art in living motion. And it can be something that is truly beautiful as the experience goes.
I love watching others as well as far as their scenes go. And I think that's one of the big things when we're talking about people who are new to lifestyle going to their first play party and just sitting back and watching, is that they're going to pick up on some techniques, some things that they've not thought of. And I still do that. Anytime I see somebody playing, I see what I can take from it, what looks fun, what I may want to implement into my own play. It's just good to do. We have gone through this list. It's a very extensive list, and you did a great job on putting this together.
Thank you. Although I'm sure I missed one or two, so if our listeners have any they would love for us to add, we definitely want to hear from them.
Yeah, to contact us, you can reach me, sir, at kuldrinskrypt.com. Funsize?
You can reach me at Funsize at cauldronskrypt.com.
I know individually we talked about these things and we've said, well, this is part of us, this is not part of us. If you could only be one type of dominant, which one of these would apply most to you?
That's a tough one, but I'm going to have to go with the caring dominant. If I could only be one thing, I'd rather care than anything else.
Okay. And if your dominant was only one of these things, which one would you pick for them to be?
Again, I'd have to go with caring dominant.
Yeah, I kind of thought so. For me, hang on, I'm thinking. There's smoke coming out right now. It's a scary sight. I guess for me, because the caring side does take precedence over the sadistic side, just barely.
If I can only have a caring dominant because I am a masochist, that caring dominant would have to understand that need and take on the role of being a sadist as part of my care.
All right. Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
No, I think we covered this particular subject really, really well. I'm sure our listeners have more types and more thoughts, and we definitely want to hear from them. Next week on the Krypt, we're going to be doing a very interesting episode on frenzy. We're going to hit Dom and Sub Frenzy, and then I'm going to throw in a special section for Switch Frenzy, which is something a lot of people don't really consider, but is something that happens.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important thing to get into. Frenzy, while it is fun, there's a lot of adrenaline pumping. There's also major crashes from it and people doing things that they just should not be doing, to be blunt about it. All right, well, that is going to wrap it up for this episode. In the meantime, go to kuldrinskrypt.com for show notes, how to subscribe information, and how to become a Patreon supporter. And on the Patreon supporters, we would like to thank our executive producer, Matt, and our associate producers, The Accidental Trucker and K2SO. They give us much needed support through Patreon that we highly appreciate. So it is because of them that we are able to keep this podcast going. If you get anything out of this, please go to kuldrinskrypt.com, click on the Support Us tab, and you can give a monthly donation as little as $1 a month or a one-time donation if you would choose to do that. Again, all of our contact information is also there at the website, and that will wrap us up for today. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all your wonderful feedback. Keep it coming. Make sure to join the FetLife group. Just search Kuldrin's Krypt on FetLife and you'll find it. This has been Master Kuldrin and Funsize for kuldrinskrypt.com. Unearth the truth.